everybody, in this video we're going to work on translating conjunctions. Let's get into it.
This is sum of number 1 on page 32. Number 1 is divided into several letters all the way A through M. So let's get through A through G here. Now here we're dealing with both ands and ifs. So they're combined here. So previously up to this point I've talked only about ands. And we talked about ifs and thens, arrows before in the previous section. Here we're going to kind of combine our skills together and see how they work. All our stuff still needs to be dyadic, where it's two-ish, and so some parentheses are going to come involved here, and we're going to figure out what to do with that as we go through it. Let's take a look at the first one, 1A. It says this: sometimes I wake up grumpy, and, so that means, hey, there's a dot. Let's go and stick that in there. And sometimes I let him sleep. Now this one gives us a glossary. That is to say, it says here's the letters that we use. W stands for sometimes I wake up grumpy, and S stands for sometimes I let grumpy sleep. When we see that those things are there, there's just a and between them. So what this one is, it's W, sometimes I wake up grumpy, and sometimes I let grumpy sleep. So it's W.S. Now, like I said, there's a sense in which this is equal to S.W, but that's not the order in which it was given. So I'm going to, even when I'm doing dots, even though there's a sense in which that's logically equivalent, we can make a little proof of how to break it apart and stick it back together and make it that way. I'm just going to do it in the order that it comes. B. Drink provokes the desire, but takes away the performance. That's from the porter in Macbeth. That but is a dot. And what's the first thing? We got drink provokes the desire. So P here stands for drink provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. All that is represented by letter T. So we got P.T. Drink provokes the desire, but it takes away performance. Again, that but means the same thing as and. C. I don't like this one, but I'm gonna say why I would translate it the way that it does. Notice here's something that you may have been told in elementary school. Oh, here is a sentence that starts with and. You're not supposed to do that. It's grammatically fine, but I'm going to say that what that means is I'm going to go ahead and put the dot here, and whatever comes after that one, I'm going to stick it right to the right. So it says, and although he was a very small ghost, Georgie had a really big idea. So I'm going to say here that is, and although he's a small ghost, which means the other thing goes on the other side. Okay, he had a big idea, although he was a small ghost. Okay, now this one I would accept S.B just as it is, even though, yeah, that's logically equivalent, just because of the order here that it's presented in the book is a bit sloppy. But this, I'd say this is B.S. D. Erythricare is warming, yet odor-free. Ugh. Well, that yet means there's a dot. What's the first thing we got? Erythricare is warming, yet, which means the same thing as and, it's odor-free. It is odor-free, it's just represented by O. So we got W.O. E. Let the people know the facts, and the country will be saved. I don't like this one either. And I'm going to go ahead and put a little, just a mark next to it. Okay, put a little star next to it. I don't like this one because I'm going to just put here what it is. It says this: let the people know the facts and the country will be saved. Here's what it is. K, arrow, S. Now, I'm not going to give you one like this, but I want you to know that they exist. You might be looking at that and going, there's no if and then in there. There's an and. So sometimes things that look like conjunctions are actually conditionals. And you might be thinking at this point, how on earth would I possibly know that? Well, looking right at it, it's not clear. But I want you to know that what that quote from Lincoln is actually saying is, if the people know the facts, then the country will be saved. That's actually what's being said, even though it doesn't look like it's saying that. That's what it is. I'm not going to give you one like this, but I simply want you to know that it exists. So look out for it in case you see it. That's actually an if-then statement. So he's saying then we could do a modus ponens there. Okay, if people know the facts, then the country will be saved. People know the facts. Hey, the country's going to be saved. Okay, if the people know the facts. Okay, that's really what's going on there. It's not one of those things. It's not actually a conjunction, even though it looks like one, which is a bit of an antiquated construction, but it's possible. F. I may be fat, but you're ugly, and I can diet. So I'm just going to start translating that one exactly as it is. Okay, I may be fat, but that's a dot. You're ugly. And that's a dot too. I can diet. So F.U.D. Is this done? Nope. It's not dyadic. Okay, remember I said dyadic means regardless of what you got, whether you got an arrow or you got a dot at this point, either one of these, it's got to be two-ish. You got to have a left side and a right side. This one does not have that. It has 3 sides. This means we need to put one of two things here. Either we need to put f.u parentheses .d, and this would be the heavy left version, or we need to put f.u.d, and this would be the heavy right version. So which one of these is it? Well, here's the trick with ands. Now, this is not true with arrows, but with ands. If it's all ands, and this one is, we got a dot, 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 it doesn't matter what order you put the parentheses in. It's got to be one of these two. You can't just go like around the whole thing, f.u.d. Well, it's got parentheses, I put around the whole thing. No, 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 no. Not that. It's got to be one of these. So here, we've got a heavy left side and a tiny right, or we can get a tiny left side and a heavy right. Either one of these are fine, but it's got to be one of these. It's got to have parentheses to make it dyadic. And like I said, if it's all ands, it doesn't matter where the parentheses go. It doesn't change the meaning at all. Not true if it's all arrows, and not true if we have things where we have arrows and ands mixed and matched, which we haven't encountered yet, but that's going to come up here in just a moment. All right, finally, let's get to letter G. Letter G is a bit different too. It's something we have not encountered yet. It says this: you can fool all the people all the time. Yeah, that's just F by itself so far. If, oh no, this is not an and, this is an if, which means there's an arrow here. So I'm going to go ahead and stick because I don't know how much space I'm going to need yet. I'm just going to go ahead and write an arrow. And remember, whatever follows if goes on the left side of the arrow. Whatever follows if goes on the left side of the arrow. So what do we have following if? You notice there's two things. It says, if the advertising is right. Advertising is right is A. And the budget is big enough. If the advertising is right and the budget is big enough, then what? Oh, then you can fool people all the time. So that means there's two things together on the left side of the arrow. In fact, it told us. Like here, you got a dot. So we actually know it's going to be a heavy left. Like all this stuff is together. There's a dot. If the advertising is right and the budget is big enough, you've got that. Then what? You can fool all the people. So if it's the other way around, like let's say if I put the parentheses in another spot, let's just examine what that would look like. If I had a dot B arrow F, like what would this one say? So let me be clear, this one is not correct, and here's why. Here's what it would say. This one says, the advertising is right, and if the budget is big enough, you can fool all the people all the time. So this thing here is floating by itself. The advertising is right. That doesn't make any sense. So that's why this one doesn't work. And think about it. What this one's saying, if it's saying, if the advertising is right and the budget is big enough, you can fool people all the time. So think about this. This works into like a arrow out kind of thing. So if I had these two things, if I had the two things, I've got the right advertising, I got a big enough budget, well, using our arrow out powers, then we can figure out, oh, then you can fool people all the time. But what if I only had one of them? Oh, I've got, let's say, the advertising is right and the budget is big enough. Oh, I have a budget that's big enough. Well, sorry, friend, you've only got half the requirements you need in order to fool all the people all the time. You need this other thing too. You need them together. You've only got one. Sorry. This is what happens if you ever filled out like an I-9 form and you're like, oh, you need your driver's license and your social security card or a passport. You need items from column B and one item from column B, one item from column C, or you could have only one from A. That's a logic problem. And you show up with your driver's license. Oh, we also need another form to confirm identity. Stuff like that. Oh, well, I only brought my driver's license. Sorry. We can't help you, friend. That's what's going on here in this kind of a situation. So again, we know it's a heavy left based on the construction that it has, because what follows if is an and statement. So we know all of the and statement goes on the left side of the arrow. Okay, let's take a look at the next few here. They're going to get a little bit more sophisticated as we go along. Let's take a look at the next wave of number 1 here. So this is still on page 32 entirely. I'm not going to do letter M. So let's take a look at these. H. It's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. You'd cry too if it happened to you. Let's take a look at this one. Yeah, so it's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. So it's my party, and if I want to, then I'll cry. That's it. All right, so parentheses on the right. If I want to, then I'll cry, and it's my party. All right, when I put it that way. Now, if it's the other way, if I say like this, it's my party, and I want to, then I'll cry. That's not what's being said. It said, it's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. Notice, that's there for no reason. Should, now remember, should is a word that also means if. So So that means there's an arrow. And just think of the word should as the same thing as the word if. So whatever follows if, or in this case, whatever follows should, goes on the left side of the arrow. So what do we got? Should the Missouri River waters start flowing over the main road? Comma. Now that comma means the then is there. So that means if it's should the Missouri River waters start flowing over the main road, we got an F on the left side of the arrow. So if it starts flowing over the main road, then this next stuff. What's left? Campers will be required to leave, and the park will be closed. So if the water starts overflowing, both of these things are going to happen. It's not here, but sometimes the word both also lets you know that a conjunction is coming. Like here's a dot that belongs together that you can stick in parentheses. The parentheses are required to make it dyadic. Now it's not here, but it could be. So watch out for that word both. It lets you know, hey, these two things go together with a dot. That's that one. Like I said, this one would end up saying, if the waters start overflowing, then campers will have to leave. That makes sense. But then also for free over here, oh, and the park will be closed. No relation to what's going on over here. That doesn't make any sense. This is all contingent on the waters overflowing. J, if I make an out, I lose. Now because of that I there, it looks like it's all yelling, all uppercase. But here's what's going on. If I make an out, then I lose the batting championship. And if I get a hit, then I win. So here's what it is. Now this one's a little bit tricky. It says if I make an out, then I lose. And if I make a hit, then I win. So that's translating it as it is. Is this dyadic? That is it two-ish? Not at all. So where do the parentheses go? Because that'll change the meaning. Now we got a couple options here. The clearest one is that, okay, here's an and statement joining two different arrows. So if I read this back, this sounds exactly like it should be. If I make an out, then I lose. And if I make a hit, then I win. Now we actually have other options that I don't think I want to get into at this point. Like I could say something like, here's something that would be logically legitimate. O arrow, L dot, H and W. You're like, well, what are these brackets, professor? Well, brackets are just super parentheses. So this is dyadic. Look, I got a tiny left and a hefty right. It's extra hefty. And then inside the hefty right side, I've got a tiny left and a hefty right. This is dyadic. This is not what is said here. This says, if I make an out, then all of the following. I lose, and if I hit, then I win. So this is saying, if he makes an out, then all this is true. And that's just stupid talk. So no, it's what we already had. It's, if I make an out, then I lose, and if I make a hit, then I win. Dyadic. Look, left, right, good to go. So this statement is actually a conjunction. Oh, but it's got arrows in it. It's an if-then statement. Nope. It's a conjunction of two conditional statements. K says, if he arrives, and if he is the new boss, I will obey him. Two ifs in there. Are there two arrows? Surprisingly, no. So this one's a little bit tricky as it is. And like I said, the book stuff is a little bit trickier than what I'll give you on quizzes, I think. Because I think sometimes the author of your textbook goes out of his way to kind of trip you up. But no, there's two ifs. So it seems like there's two arrows. No, there's actually one arrow. It's just there's two things on the left side of the arrow. What two things? And I know this because there's an and hiding in there. It says this, if he arrives, and, so if he arrives, that's on the left side of the arrow, and if, oh, this thing's also on the left side of the arrow, and he's the new boss. So what it's saying is this is a team effort here. If he arrives and he's the new boss, or if he arrives and if he's the new boss. All this stuff is on the left side of the arrow. If all this stuff happens, then I will obey him. So it's kind of like we were saying earlier about this one with the flooding. Let's take a look if we had this just briefly as like an arrow out kind of thing. Like, oh, if he arrives and he's a new boss, I will obey him. Oh, well, he's arrived. Does that mean I get to obey him? No, because it's not demonstrated that he's the new boss. Or, oh, he's the new boss. Then I must obey him. No, not a left side match. He hasn't arrived. So I'm not going to obey him yet if he hasn't shown up. If I made an arrow out problem out of that one. L looks difficult. It already if you just look at it, it looks like it's a bunch of words. I suppose all of these are. But this one already sounds obtuse. But this is actually where formal logic is helpful. This is actually a logician, James Carney, talking about logic. And so automatically you hear, if you hear this, if one can show that the axioms of System 1 can be interpreted so as to be theorems of System 2, and that System 2 has the same inference rules as System 1, then System 1 must be consistent if System 2 is consistent. And already you might have, about halfway through that, just been like, nope, I give up. Formal logic actually makes this easier. Just go through it a little bit at a time, Okay, and this is where formal logic is helpful to follow an argument. So even when people are dealing with stuff like technically like we don't understand, we can still follow what's going on if we track it with the formal logic. So far we've been doing things that are fairly simple that really anyone could grasp. But this is where people can lead us astray, is by saying technical things and us going, if you say so. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So the first word we see is if. That means already there's going to be an arrow happening. However much stuff is to the left of it or to the right, and I'm going to give myself a little bit more space just in case I need it, because I know this is a bigger problem. If one can show that the axioms of system 1 can be interpreted so as to be theorems of system 2, all that is just I. So it says, that's it. All right? All that stuff there. All of this, one can show that the axioms of system 1 can be interpreted so as to be theorems of system 2. All of that is just I. Now the next word is and. That's a dot. And it says this, that system 2 has the same inference rules as system 1. Well, all that's just R. And then we see the word then. Now what that means is everything that just happened followed the if, and it's before the then, which means all this stuff together is on the left side of the arrow. It's all a package deal. If this and this, then what else is happening? Then everything else is on the right side of the arrow. And it says this, then system 1 must be consistent if system 2 is consistent, which means on the right side of this arrow is another arrow. And for that arrow, whatever follows if goes on the left side. So what follows if? Actually, what follows, it's in a little bit of a different order. It says system 1 must be consistent if system 2 is consistent. So the whole system 2 is consistent is actually on the left side of this arrow. That's T. And well, that means then system 1 is consistent. And this, since it's following the right side of the arrow, this is a package deal. Really what this is saying is, if both these things are true, then if this thing, then that thing. So even if you don't understand the technical minutia of what's going on, what you see right now in front of you, that's the structure of what's going on. If these two things happen, then this other thing happens, then O is going to happen. That's all that's being said. I'll repeat that one more time. If these two things happen here, you got I and R, then hey, if you got T, you got O. Where would this be applied in something that might make more sense? Well, consider, like, let's say the United States Constitution, Article 2, 35 years old, and you're a naturally born citizen, then, hey, if you're elected, well, then you can be the president. Okay, well, I'm 35 years old. Well, cool. Are you also a naturally born citizen? No? Well, then this other stuff isn't happening. Well, hey, I'm 35 years old, and I'm a naturally born citizen. Okay, if you got that criteria, that's great. Were you elected president? No? Well, then it's not going to happen. Okay, that would be the same, it's the exact same, that condition in the Constitution is the exact same logical structure as this. You got these two criteria? Great. If you got those, then do you have this one? Yes? Well, then great, you got it. You win, yay. Then you don't get it? No, you don't move on.
All right, everybody, that was some work on translating conjunctions. What I'm going to do in the next video is start working on proofs with conjunctions. See you next time.